Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. This podcast explores how authors create a world that we can escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that keeps us turning the page.
Hello, I am Elena Bose, a host of Elena Meets the Author. And today I'm speaking to Ann Leary, the New York Times bestselling author of 4 novels and a memoir. One of her novels, The Good House, was made into a film with Sigourney Weaver and Kevin Kline. An essay Ann wrote for the New York Times Modern Love column called Rallying to Keep the Game Alive was adapted for Prime Video's Modern Love TV series featuring Tina Fey and John Slattery. A longer version of that essay, titled Love Means Nothing in Tennis, appears in Ann's latest book, I've Tried Being Nice, an anthology of essays about Ann's life and the things that mattered to her. Ann is married to stand-up comedian and actor Dennis Leary. Ann, I love this collection of essays and read or listened to I've Tried Being Nice in 2 days. I have laughed out loud multiple times to the same scene in your essay, Travel Travai. Can't even pronounce that. Travais, of your husband and you navigating the Italian autostrada. I hope you've got your book handy, because I don't normally ask authors to read aloud from their books.
I don't have it handy, but I could pull it up on my iPad probably. Or I could go grab one. But yes, I'll read aloud. What do you want? What do you want me to read?
Okay, these 2 particular ones I just thought were, there's so many funny parts, but I just want listeners to get an idea of your style. Can you read about becoming a silver fox, page 33 to 34, and later about your pet hate needlers, page 39 to 40?
Sure. And first I want to say, Elena, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm thrilled to be on here. And I love your podcast, but also this book, I usually write fiction, and I usually don't read when I go to book events, but I read from this book because they're personal essays and they work better read aloud. So anyway, I'm happy to read this section for you. Okay. It's from an essay called Coming of Age. Okay. My early 50s were transformational years for me. Photos of middle-aged supermodels with dazzling manes of silvery hair duped me into growing out my gray. Our hair goes gray early in my family. I found my first gray hair in my late 20s. My daughter insists she found hers when she was 12. I was tired of having that silvery stripe appear along my part every 6 weeks and found lots of advice on the internet about how to grow out the old color-processed hair without looking like a skunk. The secret involved hats for the most part. It took about 2 years until I had the final haircut that removed the last inches of dyed, mousy brown hair. Now, I was a silver fox, according to me. Once my hair was all gray, I didn't color it for 2 years, and I thought I looked quite chic. We don't have the best lighting in our house, as you can see. We don't have the best lighting in our bathroom. But I had some evidence that backed up my self-assessment. When I was all gray, I had more men flirt with me, and I'm talking about total strangers, than I'd had in my early 20s. I'd go out to our mailbox, and a man jogging slowly by would circle back to say hello. He lived on the street next to ours, he told me. How strange we'd never met. Men at the gym grinned. One even winked at me while I was on the treadmill. Guys in supermarkets and the library found ridiculously obvious ploys to get my attention. I'll get that for you, sweetheart, a man said one day as I tried to reach a box of cereal on a high shelf in the supermarket. His cane cut through the air like a sword, and cereal boxes rained down upon us. Thank you, I said, scrambling to pick up the boxes while pretending not to notice that my gallant cereal knight's eyes were burning a hole on my ass. Raisin Bran, huh? This player purred into my ear when I stood back up. My favorite, too, keeps me regular. You could set your watch by my bowels. Every morning, 8 o'clock sharp. You live in the area? Oh, I forgot to mention that all the adoring male attention I received during my years as a silver fox was from men who were between 80 and 100 years old. Finally, I figured out what was going on. I had broken a bone in my hand and couldn't wear my wedding ring for a while. When I was able to wear it again, I couldn't find the ring for about a year. One day, I opened the glove compartment of our pickup truck, and there it was. It turned out that these old men thought I was single and still had pretty good gams for a senior citizen. My friend Martha said to me one day, "Why don't you color your hair?" I told her that I was sick of coloring it, and I always admired women with wonderful gray hair. I think it's very attractive on certain women. I said, it is, Martha said. I just don't think you're one of those women. Martha is the busiest person I've ever met, and she doesn't have time for bullshit. So she's very direct, and she also loves fixing things that aren't working.
I'm guessing who that Martha is. That one, I'm guessing you didn't change her first name.
Yes. No, that was Martha Stewart. I live across the street from Martha Stewart. People think that means we live in a grand house. We don't. She has the whole other side of the street, and there's like many houses on this side. But I do know Martha, and she's fabulous. But she is honest. She's like, doesn't have time. She's too busy. And she actually really does like fixing things that don't work in many ways.
Yeah. I believe it.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've got the Needlers. We'll just do that one quickly because that one was also quite good. And that one from the very beginning.
Okay. So just to set this up a little bit, this was, I wrote some of these essays were previously published. I wrote this for an Anne Hood anthology about knitting. And she asked me to do a book event when the book came out, and this essay was in it. And it never occurred to me that everyone in the audience would be knitting while I read it. So I got in front of a group. They all had knitting on their lap, and I read this. I like to think of myself as an open-minded, accepting person, but I do have some personal biases, and there's a certain group that I find insufferable. I'm talking about the knitting community. I have nothing against people who knit in private. It's really of no concern to me what adults choose to do in their own homes. And certainly I have nothing against professional knitters. The world must be starved. No, I mean the public knitters, the ones who want to shove it in your face all the time. Full disclosure, I am unable to knit. I have the small motor skills of a 4-year-old. So I admit that it might be envy that fuels my hate, but there's something else, and I know I'm not alone. If the public knitter thought her behavior was pleasing to others, she wouldn't be so stealthy about it. She'd carry her handiwork and her tools around in the open. Instead, the knitter will wander into a room like any other person, carrying a normal-looking bag, usually a tote. If the tote is quilted or felted or in any other way appears to be handmade, you're right to be suspicious. Don't rush to judgment solely based on this accessory. A dear aunt or mother might have made the bag in private. It could contain anything, magazines, books, or a snack. But keep in mind, this is how she works the knitter. This is how she insinuates herself into polite society. When she sits down, this is the time to assess her carefully. Look for this tell. She will almost always take a moment just after she settles into her chair to smile thoughtfully at the air in front of her. If you are able to do so, leave now. Often, this is not possible, and you'll be forced to watch as she reaches into that seemingly benign satchel and extracts her instruments of torture, her yarn and needles, and whatever she is currently knitting. Try as you might, you will be unable to avoid glancing at her handiwork, and when you do, you'll catch the knitter's satisfied little nod as she flattens the woven panel out on her lap and counts the stitches. The little nod is meant for you and everybody else in the room. Yes, the little nod says, I thought so. I am perfect. So, yeah, so that didn't go over. When I actually read that now and people like it, but that time I looked out and the women were knitting like that. They were looking at me like with their knitting, like, very not amused at all.
No, it's too funny. It's very funny. Well, thank you very much. Now I'll get to my questions. Your humor and empathy shine throughout this book. You also talk about how competitive you are, especially on the tennis court. So My first question is, since it's clear that you're really funny and you're married to someone who makes a living being funny, do you ever get competitive over who is funnier?
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't say competitive, but I will tell you, and I've been with my husband a long time. We met when I was 20 and he was 25. Now we're a little bit older than that. It's been a few decades. I always know if I've said something really funny when he works at not laughing. He'll laugh generously if I'm just amusing, but if I say something that's like slays, he gets like, because I think he's a little bit like, oh, that's a competitive thing. But
funny.
I might just be imagining it. But we have 2 children who are also funny, and we always had. I write about that too. We always had like family dinners when they were growing up, no TV on school nights. And it was a thing at the dinner table I think the kids would feel also competitive about being funny. And I have, as a result, two very funny grown children. They're much funnier than we are. Yeah. Yeah. They're very funny.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Would you recommend tennis to, this might seem as a non sequitur, but because you've written about how tennis saved your marriage, would you recommend tennis to warring couples?
Well, yes and no. So I didn't grow up playing tennis. I started playing in my 40s. I'm completely obsessed with it. And I say in this book, and it's true, somebody once said to me, you can learn everything you want to know about a person on the tennis court. And that's probably true of other sports. You see, if a person's honest, if they cheat, if they are an other blamer, if they're a self-hater. So, but with tennis, since I took it up so late, I mostly play doubles. Do not play doubles with your husband or partner, your spouse or partner, as your tennis partner. They belong on the other side of the court. And so because I don't think I'm alone in this, because I know other people that just what happened. So my sister also is a mediocre tennis player, and her husband. So we'd go on vacation with them and we'd play doubles. If my brother-in-law was my partner and he made a mistake, I'd be like, oh, come on, that's fine. And he would be so nice to me. And if my sister Meg made a mistake, my husband would be like,
try.
Good try. But if we were partners, he would make a mistake and I'd be like, what is wrong with you? Like, why won't you take a lesson? Like, yeah. And then he would literally, berate me. We would be so uncharitable because because we felt, you don't have to be as nice, which actually, again, shows you that tennis teaches you how to be in life. You should be as generous to your partner in life as you are to another person, but often we aren't. We feel like we can just vent, and sometimes it's not okay. So yeah, but in general, now during COVID, Dennis and I did play as partners quite a bit because you could, you were supposed to distance. So that was a good way to exercise. And so we played with another couple. Now they divorced soon after this. I don't know anything about their marriage. I didn't know them, but we're still married. By that point, we'd gotten much better at our marriage. So we could play tennis as partners and we were nicer to each other. It was COVID. We were so happy to be outside and running around.
Exactly.
We were nicer, but we can play as partners now somewhat.
Well, I felt quite good reading this because I played pickleball with my husband last weekend and I was his partner and I was nice to him. But what was annoying was we were playing against my son and his wife, who were much better. And my husband kept suggesting that we mix up the teams.
Oh, because he wanted the better partner.
Yes.
Oh, he was he was training you. That's so funny.
He was trying to get rid of me. And I found that really annoying. In the chapter, switching again to states of mind, you tell us how growing up you moved around a lot thanks to your father's undiagnosed grass is greener syndrome.
Right.
Which is kind of self-explanatory. You also say that you might not have become a writer had you not moved around so much. Can you explain about that? And when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
Right. Okay. So yeah, we did move a lot. And often my parents would think we should move in the summer. So we wouldn't move in the middle of a school year, but school is where you make all your friends. So we'd move to an area and we wouldn't know the kids. But libraries are the same everywhere, public libraries. And, the Dewey Decimal System is the same. So when I was young, really young, I still am really into animals. So I was really into books about animals, nonfiction books. So I knew rate in the stacks. I knew the numbers. My love for fiction came from Black Beauty, which everybody knows. It's like the David Copperfield told by a horse, and lots of famous classic books about dogs and horses. And my gateway book to books about humans was John Steinbeck wrote this book called The Red Pony. And I loved it so much. I picked up The Grapes of Wrath. I don't know how old I was, but I was young because I remember how much attention I got for like schlepping this big book around and reading it. But, John Steinbeck's very accessible to young readers. He's very readable. And The Grapes of Wrath is the first book I read that, and everybody's probably read it. It's in school or something, if you remember, like the first chapter, it's about this family, the Jodes. And then the second chapter, it pulls out the Dust Bowl depression. And he just does that. And it's the first time I actually paid attention to kind of the structure and how I thought about the author and how he wrote it. And that was probably the first time I thought about being a writer, because I always loved also being a lonely kid. I played with my siblings a lot. We were always making up stories, like making up, I'm Black Beauty and you're the girl. And, like,
Yeah,
so I think that was part of it. But so, yeah, I did major in writing in college, in creative writing and fiction. And I always did want to be a writer.
Well, you met your husband when you were in college. So you were both at Emerson, and you were both in creative writing. Was that how you?
Yeah. So I had just I went to Bennington for 2 years, Bennington College up in Vermont. And then I transferred to Emerson College. And the head of the writing department there, who was this great guy named Jim Randall, said, you need to take this comedy writing workshop with this Dennis Leary. And Dennis had just graduated the year before. I didn't know that. I thought he was older. I thought he was at the age of professor.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I think I'm funny. I'm going to take a comedy writing class. And so I went to this class, and then Dennis Leary walked in, and, Dennis, he's a kind of a ginger. He's kind of fair. And guys like that, they look younger than they are. So he was 25, but he looked like he was 50. No, he looked 20. I don't know, but he was super cute. And we crushed on each other, but we didn't really date until like the day after the class was over. And then we went on a date or two. And then one night he stayed over. I was living in this shabby little studio, and he never left till this day. It turned out he really didn't have his own place to live. He was like shacking up with other comics. So I didn't know that either. He's still here. I don't know.
Fun.
Yeah. 40 years later. Yeah.
Very funny. Writing advice. You seem to be in this book to be chatting to a friend, which makes your book very easy to read. And I'm guessing easier to write in that. I'm just wondering if you have an imaginary audience when you're writing your book.
That's such a good question. My first book was a memoir. Everything else has been fiction, but my first book was called An Innocent Abroad, like an innocent, abroad. It was a play on that Mark Twain book, Innocents Abroad. And it's about, my son, my husband and I went to London for what was supposed to be 2 days. We stayed for 6 months because my son was born prematurely. And that book I wrote because when I was in the hospital in 1990, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have phones. I wrote letters. They kept me from having the baby for a while in this fabulous NHS hospital. And I was in a room with 20 strangers, and my son's fine because of them. But I wrote letters. And then 10 years later, I told this friend who's also a writer, but at that time hadn't been published either. Since then, we both have. I said, I'm trying to write this book. And she sent me letters I forgot I'd written. And when she sent them, all I remembered of the time was crying and being horribly afraid. But for some reason, because my friend is very funny, the letters I wrote her were funny. I forgot about these funny things that happened there. And so I kind of wrote them as if I was writing to that friend. And I do often give this advice to, new writers or young writers. Write as if you're writing, even in fiction, I do this. Especially if I'm writing the first person, I find a tone that I'm writing it to my really good friend who gets me. I think a lot of authors get bogged down in the reader as they're writing before they even have a publishing contract or, are ready to self-publish or however they're going to show their work. All they imagine are these like scowling New York Times critics. They don't think of everybody else who's going to really love their book. And they also kind of sell the reader short in a way in that they don't think, and I see this sometimes in writing where people don't trust the reader. They actually will hammer the funny part, like they'll ruin the joke by, because they're afraid that the reader won't get it, or they don't trust that the reader will even understand, kind of the subtleties of what they're saying. So, but your friend will, and your sister will, or your closest sibling. So I think that is something I try to do, because otherwise it's just this mass of, like faceless people. It's just too scary. Write it to your friend who gets you, because your reader will get you. Yeah. I
think that's great. Great advice. And do you, you've got your essays are so many different points you cover. Do you write it down the minute how do you, or do you reflect later these ideas that you have? How do you keep them so they're fresh? Because sometimes I think you're writing about things that that happened a long time ago. Or do you have notes? How do you, what's your process?
Well, in this essay collection, some of them were so a few of them had been previously published, like the Modern Love essay and, the Anne Hood knitting anthology. But so those probably seem, and some of them were about my childhood. So I guess I don't keep a journal. I'm way too disorganized and kind of ADD for that, but I write stuff all the time. I always have in pockets or in my bag, little scraps. I keep little pieces of paper. I have little notebooks I keep, but they are from, I'm not organized, but I always write little things down. And then later in that day, because I'm always on my computer at some point, I will put it in that notes thing on your, and then it's there forever. And so I can go back to it and then think, sometimes I find things and they're so fragmented. I'm like, no, what did I think this was worth writing down?
But that's helpful.
Yeah. Sometimes I find things and think, oh, wow, I forgot I had that idea. I write in my car. Like I just, I don't look.
Not driving.
I just, I have I'll have a bill with an envelope next to me. And I always have a pen and I will not look, but I can just scribble something quickly. Or somebody suggested I could use voice memo, but I don't know how to do that. That feels more dangerous because that feels like texting. And anything handling my phone when I'm driving seems wrong, but somehow using a pencil and piece of paper feels like I'm being very safe.
Very funny. Let's see. Oh, here we go. You are a big hobbyist. You are a qualified emergency medical technician, a gardener, an avid tennis player, a ballroom dancer, and you can strum some chords on your banjo. Do you think having hobbies helps writers be better writers? And are any new hobbies you'd like to tell us about?
Well, yes and yes. So I do think, and another a very famous author said to me once, who told me about his hobby. He had a hobby which involved making jewelry, making cool men's jewelry. And I, at the time, had 3 hobbies going. And we were talking about that. And I think it's a few things. I like learning things for some reason. I just like learning how to do things. And interestingly, when I was K through 12, I didn't like learning. I didn't like learning when you were supposed to learn. I hated school. But I do like learning things now. And I'm very curious about things. So many things I learned, I learned the banjo because I was writing a novel that involved a family that was really into bluegrass music. And I didn't know anything about the banjo and I became really fascinated by it. And I wanted to learn how to play it. But other things, so I wanted to make one day, there's this decoupage made by John Derry, and it's very expensive, these trays.
Yeah.
And sometimes I give them for gifts, and I thought, why did these cost so much money? I went on YouTube, which is I think you could learn heart surgery on YouTube. I've learned many things, plumbing, but I suddenly got into decoupage in a big way. And so at one point, my husband said to somebody who was visiting, keep moving, because if you stay still, she will glue something to you. But I really like to learn, especially gardening and anything to do with kind of visual arts really helps me as a writer for a couple of reasons. It's good to have something you're really bad at when you're struggling with something that you're pretty good at. So if I'm learning something and I'm like, how do I even make this? Or how do I play the banjo? Then I feel adept at my job, which is writing. But I also find just working with, especially so with decoupage, or, if I were to be painting or something, which I don't do, but just being conscious of color and light and the way light works and the way, images, it's very helpful as a writer when you're writing descriptive, paragraphs. You suddenly are. I find that when I'm working on with art or something, I'm even with gardening, I'm really aware of color and light and stuff. So I think that helps as a writer. But I do think
your other senses.
Yes, right. You can get really bogged down in just dialogue, but then when you're gardening, you're aware of the smell and the feel and especially light. And light is really important when you're describing, a scene. I think it really
Right.
works well.
Great. I loved your essay on the perks to an empty nest. Too often
Yes.
parents get morose when their kids go to college. I certainly did. But when your kids went to college, you and your husband shed a few tears and then realized every cloud has a silver lining. Can you tell us about that breakthrough?
Sure. Yeah. So we have two children. My son is the older one. And when he was going, the summer before his college, I was in a serious depression, really depressed. And I really felt that our whole life, our marriage, everything was kind of coming to an end. This magical thing that was our family was coming to an end. I didn't know, still are your kids when they're in their 30s, which they are now. But then, my daughter, when we dropped my daughter off, I remember we were driving away and I was sobbing and my husband was driving and then he pulled over and after dabbing my face, I was like, you can go. And I heard him make this sound. It's like this. And I look over, he's got his head in his hands. He was crying like a baby. And he was like, she just looked so small. And so we go home because she only went to college like an hour away from us. We go home and he's upstairs. I'm making dinner and watching Seinfeld. And he came down, he did what he automatically did, which was turn that little TV in the kitchen off because it's time for dinner. And I said the words he'd been waiting 20 years to hear, which were, let's watch TV while we eat. And that's when the fun began. And all the stuff we realized, I know maybe you and probably people that are listening to this were born with good manners or were raised with good manners and you're a good influence just naturally. You are altruistic and kind and generous and thoughtful. We're not really like that, but we had to behave as if we were because we knew our children deserved better than us. So we really were on our best behavior for 20 years. And then we weren't. We literally, this is emerging. We have reclining chairs and it was because my mother was visiting and she needed it. And now we were like, these are awesome. We are doing this. And now we eat our dinner in front of the TV and we just literally don't care. We walk around with no clothes on. Nobody cares. So if you're coming up to an empty nest, there's a lot of positives. You will miss the kid, but they come back. Yeah. And if there's another pandemic, they'll come back for a long time.
Yeah, they do come back. They do come back. And then you have to be civilized again.
Yes. And my kids were shocked by the recliner TV situation. They were absolutely appalled. And that watching TV while we eat, they were just like, what happened?
Very funny. Okay. In your essay, The Deep Dark Me, it's clear you're good friends with the internet and YouTube. Are you a fan of Chat GPT?
I have to say, I'm not. I don't use it. I'm very aware of it because a year or two ago, there's this authors guild that I still don't really know what it does, but we got these letters about you could see apparently 3 of my books have been used by Chat GPT. And I didn't know why that mattered. Most published authors you can find that out, that your book is on there. I don't know why, but I decided to find out what the problem was. And I decided to ask Chat GPT to write a couple paragraphs in the voice of Virginia Woolf. And what I read was such a consolation. Well, I could see what Chat GPT was trying to do. I see what they were trying to do, but they weren't at all like Virginia Woolf. So
Thank God.
Yeah, I don't know how. I do know that people my kids' age use it for writing business kind of things. And both my kids, my daughter's a writer, but she'll use it for a cover letter for a resume. And I get that, because that's always been something that I think I've written. I've looked at form letters. I don't know, but I think that creatively, I'm not that concerned about it. I think I can see it. Sometimes I read things and I'm like, was this written by a person whose English isn't their first language? And I realized, oh no, it's just auto-generated or something. But
right.
I mean, yeah, I'm not as freaked out because when I asked it to write in kind of like writers I admire, it didn't really understand what was special about those writers, or it didn't get the essence. It just was writing. It probably chose words from To the Lighthouse or something. Yeah. So.
Okay, good. I hope you're right.
I don't know. I might be wrong. I don't know.
Looking back now, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
sunscreen, like more sunscreen. And but so many things. I mean, there's something I'm 61. There's stuff I would tell my 60-year-olds. But mostly it is, and this is kind of a theme of this book. I've tried being nice. Is when you reach a certain age and you're a woman, you reach menopause. And one of the plus sides of menopause that I was aware of, I didn't know it would happen overnight the way it happened to me, but you can be a lifelong people pleaser, which is hard. And then it creates social anxiety. And then somehow like estrogen is involved in that. And when you don't have as much estrogen, you don't waste as much time trying to make everyone love you more than everybody else. And that, I guess if I were to tell my 20-year-old, well, I'd probably say stop drinking. And I did when I was in my late 20s, stop drinking. I'd probably say that because I was messed up when I was 20. But also there's this thing that I read and I used to tell my daughter all the time, those that mind don't matter and those that matter don't mind. So it's like, if people can't take you as you are, they don't matter. And, they don't matter. So, yeah.
I found I'm 62. My FOMO is much less.
Yeah. So I'm such an introvert. Like my friends all know this. Like I have fear of being invited. I like to go out, but my friends know like, oh, you don't have to, if you have a party and you don't invite me, you can post it on Instagram. I'm literally like, oh, that was the night I stayed home and watched that really good thing or played with my dog. But you know what? When I was young, I would have had it and I would have been very devastated, certainly in high school and college when I was actually, trying to get a boyfriend, trying to have friends. And that would have been hard. But I'm glad I didn't have that.
And definitely don't now. Good. So you narrated your book for Audible, and I didn't realize it was you, but I had a feeling it was because it was so funny. The comic timing was so good. But what was it like, reading aloud your true, it wasn't fiction. It was nonfiction about you out loud. What was that like?
Well, it was very frightening beforehand because I hate my voice as most people do. And when you write novels, an actress usually reads your book. So Mary Beth Hurt narrated my book, The Good House. And I wrote in this book about a glitch in the audio version of that book. Well, when I went to the recording studio to do this book, the man who produced this book had done that book and it wasn't his fault, but he was like, so it was crazy, but he helped me so much. So it's a very good question. I loved doing it. It took a lot less time. It took like 3 days. My book's not that long, but he was so helpful. He's done like 1,000 audiobooks. Most books you read, he probably produced. So he really helped me with many things, but most of it was he gave me confidence. And then, I was there were a few things I was surprised about. I guess I thought it would take a lot longer to do, but yeah.
Do you have any role models, people you would like to be more like as you mature?
I do. I actually, right now in my life, I have a few 80-something women in my life who I admire so much. And I'm watching them. And a friend of mine who's my age, we're watching because they're so active, they're dynamic. They have had really successful careers and they're still really sharp and on the ball. And a couple of them I know a tennis player who's 80 who still plays. She's amazing. She can't run that fast, but she better not get a ball near her. She will put it away. But also I just know just socially some women who are amazing. And so I guess I love their company and their wisdom, but I also am watching them. And what I've taken from them is they're always curious. They're always interested and in tune with what's going on and what younger people are doing and how they can stay with that, keep up to that speed, but also they're active. And I think I grew up not very active at all and
physically active.
Physically, right. Physically, like, I smoked until I was like 25 years old, like we all did, like just lying around. And now imagine, it's just disgusting that I ever did that. But yeah, I do. I play tennis and now I don't feel like that's enough because the people I play tennis with, they're so fit. It's because they do other things to support their tennis playing. So you have to be active. You have to get outside. Yeah, I think that's key. I think
after this interview, I am going outside.
Get out there. Get out. It's not that hot today. I don't know where you live.
Honey, play pickleball with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, and also if I'm in a funk, I do struggle with depression. I've written about that. And sometimes it's just a matter of instead of like, oh, I have to go help find a shrink or something. So this is like, go outside, be in the physical world, be in the natural world, be around animals for me, plants is really helpful with that.
Perfect. Finally, what's next? Are you working on something now?
It's funny. I usually, when a book comes out, I'm halfway through another novel. I am working on another novel, but I'm still in the research phase of it. And I don't even like to talk about it because I'm not even sure. I actually, there's a backup. So I'm kind of auditioning 2 novels and I'm starting both of them. Sometimes when I'm writing, sometimes I know I have a novel and I kind of audition narrators. So I'll have one person telling the story and the book doesn't move. And then another person. And then I'm like, oh, this is her story. So, but I'm actually doing that now with these 2 books. I'm not sure which book I can commit, the next year to, which I'm more passionate about. Because once I'm in it. And I always love it when I'm in it. But both of these ideas are very different. So yeah, I'm trying them out.
Completely fiction?
Yes. One is based on a thing. One is based on a crime. I'm like a true crime junkie, but I've never wanted to write about a murder or anything until this particular crime. And I'm not even going to say which one it is, but mine would be completely fictionalized. It wouldn't be like In Cold Blood, this would be like, this crime gave me an idea for a similar crime and something happening that I've made up. So I think that's my but we'll see.
Interesting.
See. Yeah.
Okay. The mind of an author. All right. Well, thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I've tried being nice. Haven't we all? At some point, you've just had enough. The other night, I was tired after a draining drive into the city. I was walking my dog home from the garage back to our apartment. And then, as my dog Josephine was pooping, a man asked if he could pet her. Really? Now? I thought. I cleaned up her mess and I decided to just walk on without letting him pet her. I was tired of being nice. Anne's essays are honest, funny, and relatable. Plus, such good life tips. How your husband should always be on the other side of the tennis court, never your partner. And how there's a lot of life left after your kids leave home for college. You get to be a kid again. Here's to watching TV while eating Fruit Loops for dinner every once in a while. You don't have to behave. They won't see. They're in college now. That's it for today. Next episode will be slightly different. I'm talking to Jillian Lavender about her book, How to Meditate. I figure with just weeks to go before the U.S. election, it would be good to remember how to chill and breathe. And, as always, please let me know what you're reading and loving. My contact details are on Instagram. See you in 2 weeks.